Hello everyone, it's Mrs. Fondra here today, and our lesson is going to be all about ancient Mesopotamia. That is quite the mouthful, isn't it? Can you say that with me? Mesopotamia. 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 It doesn't even sound like a real word after you say it so many times, right? So let's dive right in and talk about this ancient land and some of the art that they made. All right. So where is Mesopotamia? That is a great question. This place was originally called the land between two rivers because guess what? It was between two rivers. And if you would look on a map today, you will not see Mesopotamia because it doesn't exist anymore. Today, where Mesopotamia was is now modern day Iraq. So it's across the ocean from us in the Middle East. And this group of people were around from 3500 BCE, before the Common Era, to about 539 BCE is what the experts believe. So that was about 5,000 years ago. And if you remember talking last year about an ancient civilization, these times might sound similar to the ancient Egyptians, because you know what? They existed at the same time, just in different parts of the world, all right? Now, this is actually older than ancient Egypt, and it was the first civilization to come up with writing, okay? That's what makes it an ancient, not prehistoric, this is historic, because remember we talked cave people were prehistory because they couldn't write things down. So technically, this is the beginning of a written history, so the Mesopotamians were the first to write it down. Nowadays, if you go over there, a lot of ancient Mesopotamia is still being discovered, and we're still learning a lot of it because a lot of it was actually buried underneath the sand. So people are still there digging it out and learning a lot along the way. All right. And I have students often ask me, well, why is it gone? Where'd it go? What happened? The reason why Mesopotamia didn't really stay for thousands of years and we see it today is because besides war, which had a lot of conquerors coming in trying to take over that land because it was pretty fertile, which means that it could grow plants pretty easily. Besides people invading and the environment changing, which it got hotter and hotter and it turned more into a desert climate, a lot of scientists think that because they couldn't figure out how to continue to water their crops throughout the year, that eventually they didn't have food. So you can't really live somewhere there's no food, right? So if we continue along here, let's talk about a little bit of the art that you could find in Mesopotamia. The reason people back then would make art is because they wanted to do with their religion and their political beliefs. So they didn't make it for fun, they had a purpose behind it. They usually dedicated their art and their buildings to the kings and the gods to like make an offering to them. And Mesopotamian art was very minimal. If you listen to the word minimal, it sounds like minimum or like the very, very basic. And the reason that is because they didn't have many resources or things to make art. So they used the minimum. They were very minimal. They used a lot of natural resources like stones, and they would import metals, which means they brought in metal from other places because they didn't have a whole lot. And that's what they used to make their art. And a lot of times, these little statues that I have a picture of right here, they were used to kind of pray to the gods for rain because they needed rain to have their crops. And like I said, that didn't end up working out very well because they didn't get crops. So this is where I like to kind of compare and contrast or like look at the similarities and differences between ancient Egypt, a place we've studied, and this new place. And they were around the same time, so they're really kind of fun to look at together, how they're the same or different. So I like to always say Mesopotamia is the hardcore version of Egypt, all right? Because in Mesopotamia, the water was so unpredictable and irregular that they couldn't control their crops and to know when things would grow. Egypt, they had regular flooding. They knew when the crops would be watered. It was easy, right? Again, Mesopotamia was hot, dry, very, very desert-like. But Egypt was similar, but not as hot. So again, a little easier. Ancient Mesopotamia, hardcore, all right? Mesopotamia was on a very big open area. Like I said, it was between two rivers, and they got invaded by other people a lot. And one of the reasons why they don't exist anymore. Ancient Egypt, they were kind of in a valley and surrounded by desert. So people would have to cross a desert to invade them. So they're a little bit more protected from attacks. In ancient Mesopotamia, they had these gods that were violent and unpredictable. You never know when they'd get mad at you and like send storms and disease and they're very hardcore. Ancient Egyptians, the gods were nice and predictable. Okay, do you see a similarity here? A little harder, a little easier for ancient Egypt, harder for Mesopotamia. So Mesopotamia, we also had sacrifices to make the gods happy. Don't want to sacrifice things. In ancient Egypt, they just did some talking and the gods were happy apparently. All right. And also Egyptians, we talk about the afterlife a lot, where they were mummified and they could just go to the afterlife when they died. That was easy. Mesopotamia, nope. It's dark, sad, not a great place to be. So like I said, they have some things in common, but Mesopotamia, hardcore. They do it a little more heavy than the Egyptian did. All right. So I did talk about their ancient writing and why Mesopotamia has a history. And one of the famous things that comes from this time is Hammurabi's Code. Now, Hammurabi, that's another fun word to say, another fun name, was a king. And he decided, you know what? We should write down our rules and our laws. So this is the first kind of law book or sort of guidelines that people had. Can you read these symbols that are right on the right side of the slide there? No, you probably can't read that. I can't read that. This was what their language looked like. If we would show them our ABCs and our alphabet, do you think they could have been able to read it? No, but it makes sense to us and this made sense to them, all right? So this was written on a super tall pillar and it was put in the middle of the city. So everyone had to see it and there was no excuse as to why they broke a rule, all right? Some of these rules are kind of, like I said, hardcore. So let's talk about some of these crazy rules that they had, all right? So if a son would strike his father, like hit his dad, they would cut the son's hand off. Oh, that's pretty hardcore, isn't it? Just for maybe playfully hitting your father. Don't hit your dad, otherwise they cut your hand off. And a really famous rule that maybe you've heard before, if a man put out the eye of another man, so poked out the eye of another man, his eye would get poked out. Have you ever heard the saying, an eye for an eye? Yeah, that comes from ancient Mesopotamia. So if you accidentally bumped someone hard enough and their eye fell out, they're going to take your eye out too. Hardcore! If any man should strike a man of higher rank, so if like you hit your boss or someone who was a little higher up in the social pyramid than you, you would get 60 blows with a whip. So they would whip you if you hit someone above your ranking. Don't hit people, they would whip you. That's bad. Hardcore! And the last one, which I think is kind of interesting, another interesting one. If a builder, someone who builds homes, built a home and the house collapsed on a family, killing the family that lived there, then the builder would die because he built a bad house. So, like I said, they had really, really strict rules because they were hardcore. All right. So I think we got that point across. So let's look at some of the art that went along with this hardcore, really tough kind of culture. All right. This is called a ziggurat. It almost has that pyramid shape where they have those big diagonals going up, but it's almost more like a square building that help keep the intruders out. So these are huge walls. If you would be looking at the, let's see, over by these stairs over here, you would probably be as big as my mouse is right there. These are massive. These are huge structures, huge towers, right? These are pretty cool. They also had a lot of scenes and art about hunting. And it was a really prized thing to go hunting for lions, which is kind of something we would not do today because we want to protect the lions because there aren't a ton of them around. But back in ancient Mesopotamia, the kings would go lion hunting. So you see a lot of hunting scenes and a lot of lions because those were important, strong animals to the people. All right. And I love these ones. These are actually in a museum. The picture on the left is an actual gateway that they found, and they took it and they moved it inside a museum to restore it and kind of bring it back to its glory. So that's a huge wall that they moved into a museum. In the center there is the face of a king. So that was made out of metal, and they look at that fancy, huge beard. They always had really big beards back in Mesopotamia. It's kind of cool. And then on the far right image is a king, kind of with that sphinx body. You know, in ancient Egypt, there's a sphinx with a man head and lion body. Very similar, except for this one has wings. All right. So what we're going to be doing, we have a couple of different projects from here. Some of us might be doing these Tel Asmar figures, hint, hint. But I'm going to pause the video right here, and I'm actually going to jump into what your specific grade level project is, all right? So stay tuned. Hello, pre-K, K, and first grade. This is your portion of the Mesopotamian project. We're going to be actually doing mosaics. Can you say mosaic? Mosaic, yeah. If you remember looking at that lion wall that I showed you, or that really big, that big arch that was in that museum, that was made up of tiny little pieces of colored stone or rock or tile, and they would press them all into the wall to make something out of it. So if you put all these little pieces together with different colors, you could kind of almost make a pixelated, which means it's made out of squares, a pixelated piece of art. So in school, for my in-person folks, my pre-K kids, my 4K kids, they're going to be doing a letter for their first name. So if you have parents or someone at home to help you out, I drew big block letters. And on the inside of the letter, I put one color of paper, and on the outside, I do a different color. So then it's your initial with two different colors of paper. Easy peasy. For my kindergarten and first graders, I am printing out some guidelines or some starting points for them. My kindergartners are going to be doing lions, like the lion wall, and we're going to color in the line with a marker because that's pretty small, and we're going to just color that in, and we're going to add all these tile pieces around it. All right. My first graders, we're going to even a little more complicated, and we're doing a chariot, and that's this big wheeled cart pulled by horses. It's a chariot like the Mesopotamians had. And again, they're going to be coloring this in and then putting the squares around them. All right. But for you at home, you can kind of make up what you want to do. I'm going to show you a simple way to kind of make a lion head. That might be a little easier to draw at home. But you could really do anything. If you want to do a butterfly, if you want to do a flower, if you want to do a basketball, as long as we're doing a mosaic, which is finding little pieces together to make art, I'm happy. All right. So here's how I would set up a piece at home if I were you. You're going to want a ruler for straight edges, a piece of paper, could be really any color you wanted. And for the mosaic parts, you're going to want some colorful pieces of paper. And just to show you a good way to cut them, I have a dark blue out to show you just a little bit. Okay. So if I put my camera down here, I'll show you how I set up for a lion. All right. So here's my paper. You want to have a nice flat table to work on because you're going to be drawing some lines here. And with your ruler and probably a pencil, I'm going to use a Sharpie so you can see it a little bit better on the camera. You're going to put your ruler towards the top. If you want to measure, you can, but I'm just trying to see that this is even, okay? We don't want it super diagonal or kind of all twisty turny. We're going to try to keep this as parallel with the ruler and the top of the paper as you can. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to hold my ruler down. You see, I have all my fingers spread out really big. And I'm going to trace a line at the top of the ruler and the bottom. So when you're done, you'll have two lines to kind of almost frame in your piece, okay? So I'm going to draw one line on the top, which is easy because your fingers are out of the way. And when you go underneath, you kind of got to lift those fingers up and do the line underneath here. All right. Take a little more steps to do that, okay? Ta-da! Now, you're going to have a new space to add different colors if you want to. All right. And I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. If you think, well, maybe that was too big, you can make it smaller if you want. It's up to you. All right. So again, hold it down with all of your fingers. It's great for students to be practicing this at home. So don't just do it for your student right away. We want to get them to practice spreading their fingers and making straight lines with rulers. It's a good skill to have. All right. So I got my 2 lines to kind of frame my work, and I'm going to draw a lion head. I'm going to talk about the simplest way to do it, okay? I'm upside down, so this is going to be really fun for me, all right? So in the middle, we're just going to draw a circle, okay? Got a circle for your head. I even almost made a little bit of a chin here, and that'll work out pretty well. Lions have 2 really big ears. They're kind of like the letter C or a hill that's attached to the head. So I'm going to go up and down, and I'm going to even put another one in the middle right here. And I'm going to go up and down. I'm going to put another one inside of that too. All right. We're going to make a really big mane for our line, which is kind of making another circle, but kind of doing a little more wavy. So I'm going to just go really, really wiggly, lots of wavy, zigzaggy types of lines around our line. So it looks more like fur, okay? For our eyes, I'm totally okay if you want to make it more cartoon-like. So I'm going to do a circle and a circle, and I'm going to fill in a little bit of a black oval at the bottom of my eye, okay? Or maybe you want to put one in the middle too. You could figure out, you could do whichever one you want. All right, see what you like. And then for the nose, we're going to actually do an upside down triangle. So we're going to do a flat line in between the eyes, and we're going to make the point down. Okay, I'm going to even color mine in right away, because why not? All right, and then I always like doing the classic cat face where I go down and loop, down and loop. And you could even add a few whiskers, because, you know, he's a cat. All right, so from here, we would color in our lion. I gotta change. These eyes are driving me bonkers. I'm gonna fix this one. I'm gonna change this one. I have to have them kind of the same. All right. So from here, we're gonna color the line with marker or color pencil and crayon, because that gets kind of small. But for the bigger areas, this is where you're gonna want to fill it with other colors of paper. Now, the fastest and easiest way to cut up paper is by folding it in half. Okay. And we're going to make some cuts here. If you have a scissors, that is super handy. Where it opens all the way towards the crease, but we're not going to cut through it. Okay, so I'm going to keep them kind of small. I'll go up here, and I'm going to make them maybe an inch apart. You can see I'm kind of making these little fringes here. You could do some bigger, some smaller. They don't all have to be the same size. Say bigger will be easier, but smaller will fill those little spaces up really good. So maybe do some big and some small ones. All right. And then from here, we're going to cut the other way. So when we're cutting, all these little pieces are going to fall off. All right. So it's kind of fun to make almost your own confetti doing this. Okay. You're going to get all these little squares, and that's all right. That's what we want. All right, I'm not going to keep cutting this because you saw what I did here. But what you're going to do from here, you're going to get some glue, and you're going to start gluing and filling in this area with these little squares of paper. Okay, they don't have to be perfectly in a row. It's okay if they're a little uneven, but you're going to get to a point where you get really close to your lion, and you're going to say, well, this piece is too big. It's going to hit my lion. That's where you can take your scissors, snip it off, put it in there like that. Okay, so I like going one piece at a time when I'm doing this, so I can really have a piece here, and then I can change the pieces as I go, because if I lay all the pieces out and then I try gluing them, I usually hit the paper or I bump it and the pieces go everywhere. So I go one at a time. Okay, it's going to take a little bit of time to do this, but when it's all done, you'll have your very own wall of lion or wall of butterfly or whatever you decided to draw in the middle of yours. Okay. When you're all done, if you could put this into your seesaw so I can see it and mark it off in my grade book, that would be great. All right. Any questions, comments, let me know. You can send me a message, send me an email, and I'd be happy to help you out. All right. Happy creating.